So I'm here at this James Comey book event, and it's about to begin any moment here in Barnes & Noble. This is exactly where I saw Madam Secretary Mrs. Clinton not that long ago. Very bad position here. Loomer has been waiting all day. She's up front. Hopefully we'll be able to connect with her after the event to see what she has to say. But James Comey should be taking the stage momentarily and dropping some information on us. This book was just released. Higher loyalty. I don't know what his higher loyalty is if it's not to the people of the United States of America. He reveals in the book that he was involved in the investigation of Whitewater documents in Vince Foster's office. And for people who don't know, Vince Foster was Bill Clinton's lawyer who showed up dead in Fort Marcy Park one day after Bill Clinton fired William Sessions, then director of the FBI. That was the first time in history that a U.S. president fired an FBI director. James Comey has the distinction of being the second to be fired. I don't know if we'll hear about that today, but he's going to be saying something about his book. I don't see Mr. Comey. He's quite tall. He should be noticeable among this crowd. There he is. Jimbo.
We are honored this evening to welcome James Comey, former FBI director, to our Union Square Barnes & Noble. Mr. Comey served as director of the FBI from 2013 to 2017, appointed to the post by President Barack Obama. He previously served as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the U.S. Deputy Attorney General in the administration of President George W. Bush. Throughout his career, he has been involved in some of the most consequential cases and policies of recent history. In A Higher Loyalty, Mr. Comey shares his never-before-told experiences from some of the highest stakes situations of his career in the past 2 decades of American government, exploring what good, ethical leadership looks like and how it drives sound decisions. His journey provides an unprecedented entry into the corridors of power and a remarkable lesson in what makes an effective leader. Please join me in welcoming James Comey.
Wow. Thank you for putting a tail on me so I can be heard. Thank you all for being here. I am honored and humbled and actually a little freaked that you're all here. I wanted to write a book to be useful, and your being here and your passion is an indication to me that maybe I've done something useful. And so what I want to do tonight is tell you why I wrote this book, what I hope to accomplish with this book, tell you a couple of stories from the book that are among my favorites, and then the best part will be to take your questions and try and address as many as I can in the time that we have. But start with that word of thank you. I know people are up at night, people are waiting in line, dealing with all kinds of things. Thank you for that. Like I said, it boggles my mind. So why did I write this book? I was fired. And so I had to figure out what to do next. And I am married to an amazing person who has taught me through very, very hard times in our life with the loss of our son, Colin, that when you suffer loss, your obligation is to try and make something good come from it, not to make the loss worth it. That doesn't make sense. But simply because you're going to go on living, you have an obligation to try and make something good come from it. And so Patrice and I spent a lot of time talking in the days after I was fired, and I decided, you know what I want to do? I want to write a leadership book. Because I worry that today we don't have a good picture in our public life about what ethical leadership should be. And I especially hope that young people can have a picture of what it can be and what it should be so they don't get discouraged and withdraw from the public square and decide it's just too icky to be involved. And maybe, given my experiences, I could write a leadership book. And the more we talked about it, her feedback was, that will be boring. And it'll be on the leadership bookshelf, and people who read leadership books will read it, but you're trying to be useful, and so you need more people to read it than would read a regular leadership book. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to write a memoir, because I've always thought that was an ego thing. And one, if you read the book, you'll see one of my worries about myself has always been, is my ego getting in the way? Is it getting too big? And so I've always said to my friends and family, never a memoir. So I don't want to write a memoir. If I write a leadership book, it'll be boring. So what should I do? I've tried with this book to do both and neither. I've tried to offer leadership lessons in a way that maybe people don't realize that they're getting leadership lessons or reading a leadership book, because it's story-driven. And I will try to take, this is what I set out to do, try to take stories from my own life and career that will paint a picture of how leaders think about hard decisions, how they think about the people that work for them, what they care about, what they should care about. And so what you have, and I hope we'll get the chance to read if you haven't already, a lot of people have criticized it who have not read it. But in reading it, I hope you see there are lots of stories from my life that are not in that book. And I've had friends and family call me saying, hey, how come my story's not in your book? It's because I only chose the stories that helped drive the leadership lessons that I care about. So that's why I wrote the book. I especially hope it's useful today when I worry very, very much that we are becoming numb to the loss and the erosion of the core values that underlie this country. And I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican or neither. This isn't a political statement. This is a statement about what unites us as Americans. We fight like crazy as Americans about all kinds of political issues, and we should, and we always have. If you read history, we've had vicious fights about all kinds of things. That's how we are with each other. But above that is a set of values that we have in common. We care about the rule of law. We care about freedom of expression, freedom of religion. We care that Lady Justice wears a blindfold. And we care most of all about the truth, which is a real thing. And it's the thing we've always had as a touchstone in America and measured our leaders against. George Bush spoke falsely when he said there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Barack Obama spoke falsely when he said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And then they spent the rest of their time in office and maybe the rest of their lives trying to explain that deviation from the touchstone. We held them accountable. We tethered them to that touchstone. What we face today is a situation where lying has become so normal that when I wake up in the morning and see the President of the United States has called for my imprisonment, I actually shrug. I shrug. No, I'm not kidding. And then I stop myself and say, wait a minute. That shrug means you're becoming numb to something that is not okay, that is not normal. Whatever your political affiliation, we share a set of values. And so one of the things I hope to do is contribute to a conversation that will then take off and, God willing, leave me out of it, but a conversation about what unites us in this country, because we need to talk about that commonality and bring ourselves together, remember what we are essentially as Americans. So that was my goal for this book. It is not about Donald Trump. I couldn't write stories to try and illustrate the principles of ethical leadership without telling stories about Donald Trump. But he figures in 3 of the 14 chapters. Early in the book, I talk about one of my models for being an effective ethical leader. I learned at the age of 16, working at the Grand Union in Ramsey, New Jersey, off of Route 17, for those of you who know the area. It's not there anymore, but it was managed by a guy named Harry Howell. And I didn't know it at the time. It took me decades to figure out what this was, but he was kind and tough, confident and humble. I didn't know it, but now I can see it. He loved us, and with that love and a toughness drove us to work harder and better. And he was comfortable enough in his own skin to laugh, to take joy in the knuckleheads who were working for him, to be patient with us and understanding with us, and to risk himself and be vulnerable, smiling at us. And my favorite story from that encounter with Harry Howell and great leadership, even before I knew what it was when I was kneeling in the paper aisle one night, and the paper aisle was mine. Toilet paper, tissues, napkins, paper towels. Actually, there were plastic bags in there, which didn't make a lot of sense, but that was mine. And so my job in the evenings was to cut open all the boxes, stamp with a ink stamp the price that was going to be on that item would be sold for, and then put those babies on the shelf and make it look like no one had ever touched it. That a human being walking that aisle would think they were the first ever in the Grand Union paper aisle. And so I did that in the evenings and thought I was doing a pretty good job, and then new technology came into my life. The store got hold of a few label guns, which were big guns that had a roll of labels where the price would be applied by hitting the item with the gun, and then instead of an ink stamp, you'd have a sticker on there with the price. Major change of technology. But the advantage of it was that if a knucklehead high school kid put the wrong price on, you just pull the sticker off instead of having to tear the package to get the ink off. So I'm in the aisle, and we're told these things are gold. These things are incredibly expensive. It's brand new technology. Guard it with your life. So I was lucky enough to have one evening, and I'm a blur of stocking excellence, and I'm hitting this thing and hitting this thing and hitting this thing. And at the end of the aisle, I'm about halfway up the aisle, at the end of the aisle, towards the front of the store, one of my coworkers appears, another high school prankster, who stood at the end and said, "Comey, let me borrow the gun, just for a minute." And so I looked up at him, and I threw the gun. And the moment I threw the gun, he went like this and walked away. Because he had seen the manager, Harry Howell, walking along the front of the store. And he had in mind this awesome and slightly cruel prank. And as I let go of the gun, he walked away. And in my memory, I'm crying. And the gun is rotating back, and I don't know whether that's actually right, but that's my memory. As the gun makes arcs and heads towards the ground, Harry Howell's black wingtips. He always wore black wingtips. And I described them in great detail in the book, by the way, and I'm not picking on Harry Howell. People have said I'm picking on President Trump by describing him in great detail. If you read that book, I'm describing everybody in great detail. Harry Howell's wingtips appear, and the gun lands at his feet and smashes into many, many pieces. And I think I'm a dead man. Harry Howell looks down, looks around at all the pieces, looks at me, just a teeny, teeny smile in the corner of his mouth, and he says, "Clean it up." And then he turns and walks away. Love is a much more powerful motivator than fear. Harry Howell granted me mercy. And maybe he knew I'd been scammed, or maybe the guns weren't as expensive as I thought they were, but in that moment, I didn't know it as a 16-year-old, I was seeing great leadership. Because great leaders never ask for loyalty. They give the people they lead love and sacrifice and appreciation and high standards, and they create an environment like this 16-year-old. I wanted to be the best stalker Harry Howell had ever had, and I worked harder and harder to please him. I had seen great leadership at the age of 16, and I came to realize as I tried to lead that those are the twin pairs of successful leaders, especially that pair of confidence and humility, enough to let yourself go and be vulnerable and listen well. So that's when I'm 16. Fast forward to January of 2017. In December of 2016, after the election, President Obama commissioned the leaders of the major U.S. intelligence agencies to conduct an all-source review, which means touch everything the U.S. government has, and produce for me, the President of the United States, a picture of what the Russians did in connection with the 2016 election. What did they do? What were their motivations? What can we learn about what their capabilities are? And so the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, working under the direction of the Director of National Intelligence, set about to do that. Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you. Am I back? I'm back. Okay. Did I do something? Okay. And so they set to work to do that. And that work was finished by the first week of January. And the plan that the Director of National Intelligence laid out was, we'll brief President Obama and his national security team first, then we'll brief the Gang of 8, the most senior leaders of the House and the Senate, and then we will go to New York and brief the President-elect and his incoming national security team about this report. The challenge was there was a collection of information that's become known, it wasn't thought of by me then as the Steele dossier. There was material that was in its core corroborated by our other information. Its core allegation was the Russians are trying to interfere in the American election. And this report was written in the summer of 2016, consistent with other intelligence that we gathered. But there was lots of unverified portions of it. And so what do we do with this? And we decided, the leaders of the intelligence agencies, because it comes from a reliable source with a track record, proven track record, with a source network in the right places, and certain significant portions of it are corroborated, it's relevant and should be included. And then there's a piece that is salacious and unverified, but that the media tells us they're going to run with very shortly. So a decision was made by the four of us that we have to brief the incoming president about this material, which involved an allegation that the incoming president in 2013 had been in the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow, and there had been prostitutes, and the activity had been videotaped. Unverified, really we didn't care whether it was true, but really important for two reasons that we let him know. First, the FBI's mission is counterintelligence, and if someone has information that they're using to coerce the president or any other senior leader, one of the techniques the FBI uses is what's called a defensive briefing. You tell the person, here's what we have learned, even if we don't know whether it's true or not, you need to know that we know, and that reduces the ability of the adversary to have leverage over that person. And second,
unless the adversary is the FBI.
As the intelligence community leadership, and the press was about to run with it, how could we keep that secret from the incoming president? So a decision was made that we would brief it to the new administration team. And the decision was then made that I would do the briefing, which made complete sense. I wish I could have escaped the logic of it. But the logic of it was, you lead the FBI, your mission is counterintelligence in the United States, you know of the information, and also you're staying. You have a 10-year term as FBI director, so you're not leaving, whereas General Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, and John Brennan, the CIA director, are leaving immediately after the inauguration. And the head of the NSA, it's not an NSA isn't a counterintelligence agency, so that doesn't make sense, so it falls to you. And you, Jim, should do it alone, because it's sensitive, it may be embarrassing, and that's the best way to handle it. Totally agree with that. Wished I could have found a way not to agree. So the story I want to tell you is the morning that we go on January the 5th to brief President Obama. And we're sitting there in the Oval Office. President Obama sat in every meeting I attended with him there, with his back to the fireplace in one of two armchairs. He sat in one armchair, and the vice president typically sat in the other armchair, with the fireplace between them. To their left is a grandfather clock, and then a big thick door in the wall by the grandfather clock. So we sat arrayed around the president, two couches, and then wing chairs at the end of the couches. General Clapper sat facing the president and the vice president and did his briefing. He offered the detail of what we found and what we knew and why we knew it and all that. Talked at great length. And the president and the vice president asked questions, and there was quite a bit of engagement about Russian capabilities. And then he paused and said, there's additional material that we think is important to bring to the attention of the incoming team, and then he summarized that material for the president and vice president. And President Obama said, what is the plan for briefing that material to the President-elect? General Clapper said, and I was sitting just to General Clapper's right, so facing the President. And he said, well, Jim's going to do it. He's going to meet privately with the incoming President and brief him on that. President Obama has quite a poker face. And so I'm now in President Obama's seat, and I'm sitting just off to his left. And he looks up, and he turns his head to me, and goes like this. It just gives me a double eyebrow raise, and he lowers the eyebrows, looks back to Clapper, and says, what else? Now, in that double eyebrow raise, kind of a Groucho Marx deal, I don't know whether it was, you poor bastard, or how are you feeling about this, or be very careful. I didn't know. But I left the Oval Office, went back to my office, and shortly thereafter, my friend Jay Johnson, who was then the Secretary of Homeland Security, called. And I've known Jay since we were federal prosecutors here in Manhattan in the late 80s. And Jay said, hey Jim, I'm worried about this plan for you to brief President-elect alone. And I said, me too. And he said, have you ever met Donald Trump? And I said, no. And he said, be very careful, Jim. And I'm thinking, that is not helping. And I said, okay, Jay, thanks very much. That was the substance of our phone call. He hung up. And I don't know whether President Obama asked him to call, but what he was doing was giving voice to the eyebrow raise. To be careful, be very careful. You're doing something that you can't get out of, but it's going to be very difficult. And that led, as you'll see in the book, and I'm not going to go into it now, to my first encounter with the new incoming president, not far from here at Trump Tower the next day. I tell those stories to try to illustrate how leaders should act. President Obama and President Bush both had an ability to use humor to diffuse tension, to make people relax so they would tell the truth to the leader. Subtle, it is not a Henny Youngman routine in the Oval Office, but it is hard for the President of the United States to use humor. Because to use humor is to make yourself vulnerable. Because if I take a chance and say something, a joke to you or a facial expression to you to try and lighten up your mood, I've just risked that you'll misunderstand me or think less of me. It takes confidence to show that kind of humility. The same kind of confidence that I saw at the age of 16 in a guy named Harry Howell, who was secure enough in his own skin to be humble and connect and laugh with a group of kids. That is at the heart of effective leadership. That is at the heart of ethical leadership. What I'm trying to do with this book is offer people, especially young people, a vision of what it should be, so that they can decide not only should be that, it can be that, and not withdraw from the public square and pursue leadership roles. That's my mission in writing this book. Now I want to take your questions.
James Comey lecture on ethics and leadership was like a Stormy Daniels lecture on abstinence. Ridiculous.
Okay, thank you for submitting these questions. You have awful handwriting.
Loomer asking Comey how it's ethical to brief the president on an unverified urination document. Oh, Laura Loomer being ejected from that. Let her speak! Good going, Laura!
Okay. So we're back to the actual cards.
I want to answer curiously.
The first question is, what can you say to people who are idealistic, who want to make a difference in politics, but are disenchanted with the way it is now? Do not withdraw. Do not become disenchanted. This great country of ours is better than our leadership. This great country of ours country of ours is imperfect. As I said, we fight about all kinds of things, but this great country of ours, we share a set of values that are our bedrock. And that is where you should focus, especially as a young person. We've been through all kinds of challenges, far worse challenges than today. I write at the end of this book an epilogue that I hope is optimistic. I do believe that damage is being done to important norms in this country. And again, that's not a political statement. I don't care what your views are on policy issues. I don't care what it is about taxes or immigration or any of that. We have a challenge to our values right now. But I liken it to a forest fire. That forest fire will do damage, but it will create opportunities for growth. And I already see it. I already see tremendous energy. As I write in the book, I guarantee that parents are speaking to their children about integrity and truth-telling and prejudice and fairness and how the criminal justice system should be and how our government should be. In the wake of that forest fire, that growth will happen. We will see a transformation in a lot of ways, and maybe a rebalancing of power among our branches of government, as we did after the last forest fire, the great forest fire of my life, which was Waterloo. And so I would urge people, do not be discouraged by all the noise and the anger.
Kick her out!
Okay, we're back to the cards. Maybe a small side note, we should not be yelling at each other. We share, no matter where you orient yourself on the political spectrum, which is increasingly confusing these days, wherever you orient yourself, you shouldn't hate people who are in another place on the political spectrum. We are all part of this great experiment, which is the United States of America. We share a set of values. We ought to talk to each other, listen to each other. And I hope the conversation I want to be part of will be civil, and it will be mostly on cards.
Yes, so you can throw away the hard questions.
Okay. Dear Mr. Comey, is this the first book you've written? Can you tell? Yes, it is. If so, was it challenging to undertake a process like this for the first time? Thank you. And the answer is yes. And hard in a way that I didn't anticipate. I've learned from great teachers, starting at Northern Highlands Regional High School and thereafter, from my parents, my first writing teachers, how to write reasonably well. So I know how to write and have done a lot of writing. What I didn't know how to do, so I could write stories. What I didn't know how to do was put them together. So what order should they be? How do I transition from one story to another? And what would look back, how could I divide a story up and flash back and those kinds of things? Very hard. It takes a village to write a book. And I had great feedback from people who do this for a living and from my awesome family who were brutal in their feedback. And they helped me put together something that I think holds interest in a way that my sort of rote orientation of stories in chronological order wouldn't have. And so that was the hardest thing for me to learn that. And then even to the last minute, editors would say, what if we take chapter 3 and make it chapter 1, and then make 2, 4, and eventually as an author, you just get sick of the whole thing.
No one cares about
And you become a little weak. And then you need people around you to say, no, if you disagree with that, you ought to push back. That whole process of going from stories, which were pretty easy to write, to putting together a book was really hard, and gave me a renewed appreciation for authors and just how much goes into what's on these shelves. So thank you for that question. Are you afraid Trumpism will live on even if Trump exits the political scene? And I'm not sure exactly what Trumpism is. To the extent it's people's passions about dislocation and the effects of globalization on certain parts of this country and lack of adequate education, all the challenges we face in parts of this country, I hope doesn't go away. I hope people's passion for that remains. What I hope goes away is the derogation and the avoidance of those values that I think are so important to us. The rule of law, most importantly among them, and that we can have disagreements about policy, about industrial policy or tax policy or tariff policy or even environmental policy without hating each other and without having to tear down the values that are the core of this country. And so I don't expect or hope that the political passions will leave the scene. They should be. People believe them. I know that they do. But what should leave the scene is the anger and the derogation of our values. Okay. Which will take longer to recover? Democracy, diplomacy, or decency? That is a great question. I think the first and the last are connected. But I think to restore our democracy is by and large healthy, but to make it healthier, we need more decency. We need less yelling at each other and less hating across political divides. And so I think democracy and decency will move together in tandem, will improve together in tandem. I think that takes longer to the extent the questioner means diplomacy in terms of an approach to foreign policy and the work of the State Department. That should be relatively easy to restore. Longer and much harder and more important is that health in our democracy and the decency will help us get there. Okay. Do you think Trump's actions in relation to your role and more generally come from ignorance or willful disregard for rules and norms? I don't know for sure. I'm sure as a first-time leader, I would expect as a first-time leader, the president was unfamiliar with a lot of ways in which the government works, and so I would chalk some of it up to not understanding and what the question means by ignorance. I think, though, a lot of it, especially now after a year or so, tweeting that people should be in jail or that the Department of Justice is terrible or the FBI is terrible, those are things that any intelligent person, and the president is a smart person, would know contravene our norms. It is doing it anyway. You see in the book I recount our dinner where the president asked me for the Pledge of Loyalty. I was shocked when first asked, and so all I did was stare. And when he next asked at the end of the dinner, I had interjected to offer some truncated but real views on the importance of the separation between the White House and the Justice Department and the FBI. So even there, I think as a new president, the president fairly understood the importance of the value that was being contravened by a request for loyalty. And so I would say it's probably a combination, but some of it by this point has to be intentional avoiding of a norm. Someone asked, hate crimes against Muslims rose significantly since the 2016 elections. How would you recommend the FBI and other law enforcement agencies handle this? The way I hope you know they already are, I can speak for the FBI. The FBI's mission statement we rewrote when I was there, is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Both of those missions, those parts of the missions, are implicated by hate crimes and attacks or bullying based on national origin, sexual orientation, any of the things that should unite us but can divide us. That's the FBI's mission and passion. So what the FBI has been doing, especially since, because we saw a rise after the 2016 election, is making sure that all over the country, the FBI is in every community in this country, we were in touch with people who would see these things and tell us about them so that we could act on them. And I'm highly confident that work is going on today. So, if you have a concern, you should make sure you talk to local law enforcement or the FBI about it. Know that you're pushing on an open door. That is something they consider their job and their passion. When I see unethical leadership in the workplace, what can I do to counteract it? Really hard. Find ways to address it that don't require you in the moment to risk your employment. Because oftentimes an unethical leader is not interested in being given any feedback at all. Just remember, to take feedback as a leader, you have to be confident enough to be humble. And most unethical leaders are insecure people, and so they're not able to seek the truth from you. And so it has to be done carefully. The good news is, almost all institutions that I'm aware of, public, private, nonprofit, have mechanisms for the reporting of this kind of thing. Critical to the FBI is our anonymous reporting mechanisms, and especially our annual anonymous employee survey. Highly likely where you work, you have something similar, make use of it. Make use of it, because if you're seeing it, everybody around you is seeing it, and the institution, if it's worth working there, cares about that kind of thing. Now, if you decide that the institution, the unethical behavior you see in your boss is characteristic of the culture of the institution, you ought to seriously consider leaving. You ought to consider leaving. Because it's very, very hard from below to change the culture of an organization. But you should not let it go. Because you will be miserable, everybody around you will be miserable, and you will not be serving well an institution that you care enough about to work at. If you could change one thing you did during the 2016 election and immediately thereafter, what would it be? Assuming no magic wand or time machine? Because I would rather not have been involved, honestly. And I don't mean this to sound flip. I would rather Hillary Clinton never have used a personal email system. I would rather Anthony Weiner never had a laptop. Because I hope you see this when you read the book. At every turn, the choices were bad and worse. I could never find a door that said, here are your good choices, here's your escape from this nightmare. I hope what you see in the book, those stories, the reason those stories are important to the book, is that you'll see a leader, a group of leaders, grappling with really hard questions. And even if you don't, and I don't care if you emerge from the book agreeing with the decisions I made, I hope you'll emerge from the book seeing, oh, okay, now I see what they were grappling with. I may have weighed it differently, but I get what they were dealing with, and I also get that they were not on anybody's side. If I could do one thing differently during the election, there's some small things that I screwed up. I would speak differently and change the way I described Secretary Clinton's behavior so as not to have confusion about whether she was grossly negligent or extremely careless. I would still find a way to offer transparency to the American people because it's critical to their faith and confidence in our work. But I caused a kerfuffle and confusion that continues there. And I wouldn't have sea-crested it as my children said I did. That I didn't announce at the beginning what we were finding. What they mean by sea-cresting is, my kid said, it's like Ryan Seacrest says, and the winner is, but first this commercial. And they said, Dad, everybody wanted to hear the answer at the front. And that's an ego thing on my part. I thought, no, I know how it should go. If I tell them the conclusion at the front, they will listen. And the listening to how we did it and what we found is key to your confidence in the result. But that was a screw up. That was a mistake. But other than that, as painful as it's been very painful for me and the people who worked with me at the FBI on the same facts, the same circumstances. So assuming I can't change those, I think I would do the same thing. And I pray that no future FBI director ever finds himself in that position. But I think in that situation, whenever we had a bad and worse choice, we chose bad. Maybe one regret. I regret that I didn't have an opportunity as the election approached to explain the thinking. Why? And never really got that. Got a little bit in Congress, but never had the chance. I didn't think it was appropriate to try and do it that close to the election because we actually didn't know exactly what we had or why we were finding hundreds of thousands of Hillary Clinton's emails and classified information emails on Anthony laptop. So that's probably a wandering, but that's my best answer there. Okay, director, former director. What would you say to those critics who say there is a deep state? In current events, the United States intelligence community like NSA, CIA, and FBI have been all over the media in support of the idea that there is a deep state. And then someone said something nice about which I'll skip over. There is a deep state in this sense. There is a collection of people, the CIA, NSA, the FBI, and the United States military services, who care passionately about getting it right, care passionately about the values that I think we need to talk about. No matter how they vote or how they talk about it at home, try desperately to do the right thing. That is deep. That is unchangeable, actually. No president in a single term could screw it up. It would take generations to change the culture of the United States military, in its essence, of federal law enforcement, of the intelligence community. Generations. And that should comfort all of us. There is a ballast. There is a deep ballast in America. There is not a deep state conspiring against the leadership, elected leadership of our government. In fact, the adherence to values and the loyalty to the nation makes all of those people who are the ballast of this country desperately want the elected leadership of this country to succeed. And I mean it when I say in that book, I wanted Donald Trump to succeed as president. I would have wanted Hillary Clinton to succeed. It's not a political statement, that's an American statement. And that is a reflection of the way people are in the ballast that is the whole of those institutions. Do you think it is possible that your concern with the appearance of impartiality outweighed your interest in making sure your actions were impartial? Was this something you asked yourself? Great question. Yes. I asked myself many times, how should I try to understand public faith and confidence in the FBI? Because I don't want to consider public polls. But despite the way I was raised, I'm sure your mother's told you the same thing, you can't care what people say about you. When you're the director of the FBI, you have to care that the American people have faith and confidence, that you're independent, honest, and competent. And so I was keen to abide that, but I also asked myself the question, are loud voices screaming in the public square, and we have a few of them, are there loud voices screaming in the public square that are causing you to overweight and misread public faith and confidence? So I asked that a lot, and I don't think so. I think even if the extremes of our social media or the extremes of our cable news networks had never been born, there would still, even in an 18th century America or 19th century America, be intense interest in a criminal investigation of one of the two candidates for President of the United States. Intense interest on the part of the American people in being assured that this investigation, no matter what its result, was done competently, honestly, and independently. And so I did ask that question and think we got to the right answer, which is the American people care about this without regard to the loud voices, and honestly, they should care about this. And so we, if we're going to retain their faith and confidence, we need to try and offer them transparency to demonstrate we've done this in the right way, something that Justice Department policy permitted. What I did that was unusual, and I'd never heard of it being done before, was rather than stand with the Attorney General and make the announcement, I did it separately. And that was, in my experience, a violation of a norm and a tradition that I thought was necessary. And you'll see in the book, if you read it, I believe reasonable people can see that differently, and I explained to you why I saw it that way, but I'm not sure that I'm right about that. But that's how I approached it. So thank you for that question. Who would you prefer to play you in the movie version? I would prefer there not be a movie version. How about that? Is Chris Noth or Chris Cooper? My children are actually lobbying for an actor named Kyle Chandler. Friday Night Lights, is the Friday Night Lights fan? You obviously know, Lord willing, it won't be a movie, but the problem. A lot of camera angles would have to be used. What is my biggest regret? how would you remedy it if given the chance to redo it? I guess I don't want to answer this question by giving time machine answers, because honestly my biggest regret is that we were involved at all in the things we were involved in during the 2016 election, but I can't change that. I think my biggest regret is that I wasn't able to explain it better. And the cost of that, I worry about, actually not worrying about me. I'm fine, awesome family, and I'm a really happy person. I worry about the hits to the FBI from that. And I think especially after the election, if I could have done a better job of explaining why we did what we did and that we're not on anybody's team, that would have been better for the organization. And I wish part of it was lack of opportunity, but I think I could have done a better job. Work-wise, that's probably my biggest regret. Okay, they asked a question which we're talking about in the book. Maybe I'll just tease the book with this one. Why did you get ahead of the Justice Department and your boss, Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, in announcing the possibility of an issue with Hillary Clinton's emails? Too long an answer for here, but I try to explain in the book the things that led up to the decision I made on in the end of June, early July, to step away from an Attorney General that's a personal friend of mine, who I've known for a long time and really like. And in October, when the ultimate nightmare landed on us with the Andrew laptop. I hope you'll read that with an open mind. Again, I mean this, I do not care whether you agree with me. I care that you see how we thought about it. And I care very much that you walk away knowing that the FBI wasn't and isn't on anybody's team, and that's the way it has to be. So thank you for reading this book. Thank you for showing up here.
Were you aware of Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act violations?
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
That guy was there waiting to throw me out. James Comey, the Clinton homie, delivering a dopey.
Very soon, our security staff will begin escorting you safely out of the event space. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, that was a lot of bullshit. Were you aware of Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act violations, Mr. Comey? How did you allow that to happen under your leadership? That's a crime. Are you going to throw me out for asking a legitimate question about crime within the FBI?
Right there.
Okay. He didn't want to answer that question, did he? Boy, James Comey answers easy, stupid questions on index cards, but he doesn't want to talk about his deputy director violating the Hatch Act and receiving over $1 million for his wife's state senate campaign. And he doesn't want to talk about how Andrew McCabe forced Robin Gritz out of the Bureau. Do you know Robin? Are you an agent? Do you know about Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act violations?
What did he do?
Andrew McCabe accepted over $1 million for the state senate campaign of his wife.
Right, yeah.
And he wore T-shirts and campaigned for her. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a violation of the Hatch Act, and that's a crime. On the side of justice.
Yeah, me too.
And when the director of the
What'd you think of
FBI
the
allows
event?
crimes to be committed,
Of the event?
that's a problem.
Were you in the talk?
I thought the event was a fluffy piece of nonsense, and
I
I
thought they were
think
going to allow real questions.
I thought they
I
might
didn't know they
allow
were gonna
real
do
questions,
the
but
card thing.
we should have known they wouldn't.
Yeah.
You're live right now on Crowdsource
really?
the Truth.
On Periscope?
Well, Periscope
Crowdsource the Truth.
and
That woman who tried to ask a question was being somewhat civil.
that was Laura Loomer.
Who's that?
That was Laura Loomer,
But
one
who-
of my
who's-
associates.
oh, really?
She's a reporter. She's a hard-hitting investigative journalist who asks questions that
Yeah.
people like James Comey don't want to answer. Like, how did you allow crimes to be committed in the FBI, by the FBI, while you were the director of the FBI?
So what do you think happens? You think he's going to...
I think he's got
going
a
to
lot
jail?
of trouble ahead of him. I can't say if he's going to go to
You
jail
think he
or
wouldn't want
not.
to draw so much attention to himself at this time, right?
Well, I think
When
he's
he's
trying to
going to get
diffuse
indicted.
it. I mean, everything that he was talking about there was about how Trump did, I could tell you this. James Comey giving a presentation about ethical leadership is like Stormy Daniels giving a presentation about abstinence. So that's what I think about it. But thank you for participating with me here.
Good
And
luck.
check out Crowdsource the Truth on
Crowdsource the
YouTube.
Truth. Will do.
Well, we're going to see if we can meet up with Laura outside. I wonder if those guys have seen her around. I think she's all right. She was texting me while we were in there, so Laura should be okay. Just leaving Barnes & Noble right now. I'm glad we got to see the look on James Comey's face when he failed to answer the question about whether or not he knew about Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act violations. What's the number one reason James Comey should be locked up?
He's a leaker. He's a liar. He obstructed justice. He's just as corrupt as Hillary Clinton, and they both belong in jail. Lock them up.
All right, I want to ask you guys a few questions.
Who are you, first of all, to ask us anything?
What do you think about James
I'm sorry, I
Comey
asked you a
ignoring...
question.
I'm Jason Goodman. What do you think about James Comey ignoring Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act violations while he was the director of the FBI?
Jason, where are you from?
That's a
Where are you
crime.
from, Jason? Jason, where are you from? How about saying it was a matter instead of an investigation? How about...
Calm down, calm down. I'm going to talk to you. What am I lying about? I'm saying that he ignored Andrew McCabe's criminal violation of the Hatch Act. Andrew McCabe was the deputy director.
You, but ex-agent Comey is not coming. He is going directly to Guantanamo Bay, where he belongs to. His custom-made orange suit is made this morning.
Okay, do you understand what I'm saying, though?
To get a little bit of suntan.
I'm agreeing with
Yeah,
you.
that's
I'm
it.
agreeing with
Yeah,
you.
okay, yeah, fine.
He ignored crimes.
I'm not
by the
arguing with
deputy
anyone. I'm
director.
just saying the facts. He's a liar.
protected Hillary Clinton in a
He wants to
32,000
overthrow.
Okay, let's talk to this woman. What do you think is the number one reason he should be locked up?
This is simple. I've told you 3 times. He leaked classified documents. It's not that hard.
But do you
Keep
think
it
that's
simple,
the worst
stupid.
thing that he
That's
did?
it. I don't know if it's the worst thing he did, but if that's the only thing that he did, he belongs in jail.
How about ignoring the financial crimes of the Clinton Foundation for almost 20 years?
Absolutely, absolutely.
A pawn of the Clinton Foundation as well. Protecting the crimes.
That's
Hiding
exactly
the
right.
crimes.
What about
protecting them.
covering up the violations of the Hatch Act?
Absolutely.
You guys gotta pay attention to the people who are on your side.
Lock Comey up! Lock Comey up! Lock Comey up! Liar! Liquor!
What do you think is the number one reason James Comey should be locked up?
He's too damn short.
Well, Charles, I want to try to see if we can go locate Laura. She was...
She got kicked out.
Oh, yeah, I know. She got kicked out. She did a good job dyeing her hair so she wouldn't be immediately recognized.
I didn't recognize her originally. But she just went down that way. This is a lady who watches our show.
Oh, hello. Nice to meet you. Lovely to meet you. I'm Jason. Hello, Andrea. How are you? Well, I don't know if we'll see James Comey exit out this way.
He comes out the back. He's a Brady cat. The same place we went. Maybe that's where Laura went. Because she
Maybe
went.
we should go back there and see if he's coming up. He's gone already. He left a while ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, he was the first one out. On his way out, I asked him if he was aware of Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act. Who's
He
this
didn't
guy?
apologize, did he?
For what?
For Clinton not
Didn't apologize
being
for
president.
anything. He didn't. Oh, no. Sorry, that's not what we
Apologize
need
for
an
that?
apology for. What we need is an apology for him not investigating the financial crimes of the Clinton Foundation for almost 20 years.
Oh, okay, I get who you are.
Really? What crime did the Clinton Foundation?
I'm so glad you asked.
Yes.
Well,
This is like a Woody Allen movie. I happen to have
Okay,
Charles
thank you, by the
Ortel
way.
right here.
the charity fraud.
Yes. You're the
Have you ever
charity
heard? Have you ever heard about the Trump Foundation?
Yes. Have you ever heard of Charles Ortel?
No, but I'm not talking about Charles Ortel or whatever.
But you know
I'm
who
talking
he
about
is?
that. No, I don't
He's the
know.
world's expert on charity fraud. You know
All
who
right.
you're talking to?
Anyway,
Me.
yeah.
Charles Ortel.
So why don't
try
you
me out for
investigate the Trump Foundation?
I'll answer your question.
Because there was exactly $25,000 paid on a portrait. So if I give
$25,000.
Oh
yeah,
my
on a
God.
Trump, portrait.
Imagine
Let's call the
What's
FBI
size of
right
the-
now.
What's the
Oh,
size
wait,
of
it
the
doesn't matter.
Wait a second, to you
So
it doesn't matter. What's the size of the Clinton Foundation fraud?
I don't know.
2.3 billion.
Really?
Yes.
And where you got it from?
Huh? Where did I get it from? The public
Oh, so you
file?
were Charles,
IRS, the
whatever.
Clinton
Anyway,
Foundation
the thing is,
website.
You got it from the IRS.
I got it
Just
from the
take one
public-
step back.
the
Take
Clinton
one
Foundation
step
website.
back.
Wait. So now
You know where
the
the-
IRS has this information, $2 billion in fraud,
Right.
and they're not investigating?
Yes, and you know why?
Why?
Because the person in charge of the division of the charity fraud is Lois Lerner in this time period where the fraud
know
escalated.
Lois,
Okay, so who are you?
I'm Harry Samaru. Pleased to meet
Okay,
you.
I'm Charles Ortiz.
Corporate attorney, CPA.
Oh,
Thank
really,
you.
Really?
Yes,
okay,
of
you
course.
have.
Really,
So you need to
really,
go
really.
watch.
Take a look at the financial.
I
file.
will, and I know, and
don't-
whatever.
don't-
okay.
Do you know my
I'm
last name?
just saying.
O-R-T-E-L.
All right.
Go look it
My
up
last
on the
name
website.
is Samaroo, and I'm an
S-A-M.
immigrant. I came here when I was 18.
Good
I
for
went
you.
to, I became a CPA, and
Right.
I became an attorney.
All right.
And whatever.
All right.
You're
I'm
the
not an
perfect
immigrant, but
guy.
I went to Yale and Harvard Business School, and I retired 16 years ago when I was
You should have
46.
gone to Baruch and St. John's University.
Oh, okay, so I know about charity fraud, and you, sir, do not.
What an asshole.
There's Laura.
Hey, Laura, did you see Dopey James Comey exiting the
Oh,
building?
he left?
He left.
Oh, wow.
We could check the back door, but he's gone already.
Yeah, that's
he
funny.
left. All right, well, I mean,
That was fun.
This was fun. Here, come around here, Laura. This was a fun event where we got to see James Comey basically.
Well, she got kicked out. What happened to you?
Well, I mean, you know, I leave the tough questions to Laura. I tried to ask him at the end when he was leaving. I asked him if he was aware of Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act violations, and he looked at me sort of like, you know, sort of like.
Wait, he walked right out the door?
Just now?
No.
No, I know. He walked right out the door, though, right? Because I had to go in here.
I don't think he
Where
did.
did you find him leaving?
No, upstairs. He just walked off the
he walked off
stage,
the
and I was
stage.
waiting at the stairs, and he came
Oh, okay.
came right by, and I
Awesome.
just yelled at
Yeah,
him.
well, they kicked me out because, you know, I asked him.
What did you ask?
Well, so he's like, oh, now I'm going to take your guys' questions. And I was like, hey, Comey, how is it ethical leadership to brief the President of the United States on an unverifiable and salacious dossier? And then how is it ethical leadership to, or truthful, to not inform him that that dossier was paid for by his political opposition, Hillary Clinton?
And verified by Yahoo.
Yeah, and then everyone started booing me, and Comey was just like, you know, oh, and they escorted me out. They had like 10 security
It
guards.
was really ridiculous.
Yeah,
it was really ridiculous. You look great with the new hair.
Thank you.
I didn't recognize her. And I didn't want to say, are you Laura Loomer? But then I asked somebody else. Yeah, it's Laura Loomer.
Well, I think it was a really interesting late night stream there with special guest Dopey James Comey.
Yeah.
He actually referenced the time phone hack.
He did?
He said if he had a time machine, he would change things. And I was like, Quinn, time phone hack. James Comey, time phone
Maybe
hack.
he has one.
Well, I should have brought it back to a Hack to the Future mug form, but I failed to. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow. James Comey will still be dopey.